President Trump is getting involved in what some are calling the biggest diplomatic crisis in the Middle East since the first Gulf War. Correspondent Rich Edson fills us in tonight from the State Department.
President Trump has sided with Saudi Arabia and its Arab partners against Qatar in a diplomatic dispute that is isolating Qatar and threatening Gulf cooperation. Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Bahrain, and others have cut diplomatic ties over what they say is Qatar's support of terrorist groups. The president tweeted, quote, "During my recent trip to the Middle East, I stated that there can no longer be funding of radical ideology. Leaders point to Qatar. Look. So good to see the Saudi Arabia visit with the king and 50 countries already paying off. They said they would take a hard line on funding extremism, and all reference was pointing to Qatar. Perhaps this will be the beginning of the end to the horror of terrorism." Traveling in New Zealand, the Secretary of State offered a more neutral assessment, saying the U.S. is hopeful these countries can find a way to resolve their differences. As to the president's tweets,
the president has his own unique way of communicating with the American people and the world. And it served him pretty well, and I don't intend to advise him on how he ought to communicate. That's up to him.
Qatar argues these countries are trying to blunt its regional influence and that it supports popular democratic movements in the Middle East.
We recognize that Qatar continues to make efforts to stop the financing of terror groups. They have made progress in this arena, but we recognize that more work needs to be done.
With the region and president seemingly opposing Qatar, its critics say Qatar will have to alter its behavior to end the impasse. Mohammed Fahmy, a former Al Jazeera English bureau chief imprisoned for more than a year in Egypt, is criticizing his former network, which the Qatari government sponsors. In a statement to Fox News, Fahmy writes, quote, "Qatar remains under an unprecedented siege until it shuts down Al Jazeera, expels wanted Hamas and Muslim Brotherhood leaders living in its capital, ends its financing of terrorists and support of the Iranian agenda." Qatar's defenders point to the largest U.S. military installation in the Middle East, an airbase in Qatar, and Qatar's role in mediating regional conflicts, though this may be one of the most difficult and challenging conflicts it has been involved in. Brett.
Rich, U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Nikki Haley opened the 35th session of the UN Human Rights Council today with a warning to the group. Take a listen.
As you know, the United States is looking carefully at this council and our participation in it. We see some areas for significant strengthening.
So why the warning?
The warning is over what she calls an anti-Israeli bias. She pointed to 5 different resolutions in the month of March criticizing Israel and then compared it to Venezuela, which she said the council failed to sanction, even though Venezuela, she said, has robbed its people of human rights. So she says she wants to reestablish the council's legitimacy, and therefore the administration is reviewing what kind of role it is going to have in that council. Haley then criticized Cuba and Iran. She even mentioned Saudi Arabia as a country that has not lived up to the full rights, the full standard of human rights on that council.
Rich Edson, live at the State Department. Rich, thank you.